Hey guys, Ramsey here. Welcome to another video. Today we have a very special video for you because I don't think anyone else has done this video before on YouTube, or this type of video, let's say. It's also something that really inspired me, and it was one of those sparks. You know how sometimes when I'm describing a perfume, I just feel like it just comes to me in a story? This is one of those videos where I was instantly like, I have to do this video. And the spark came from my brother Jonathan, 1970. Who, if you're not subscribed to his channel, I would highly urge you to go do so. He's got some amazing, hard-to-find fragrances he discusses on his channel, some rare, discontinued vintages. But he told me something, and I instantly thought, I have to do this video. He said, did you know that Pierre Dinand created the YSL logo? And I said, no, I had no idea about that. I knew that Pierre Dinand is one of the all-time greatest bottle designers of all time. But I didn't know he also designed the YSL logo. Jonathan was like, yep. I said, wow, that's amazing information. So I'm going to do a video on bottles in my collection designed by the great, what I would consider, bottle designer extraordinaire, Pierre Dinand. If this video does well, if you guys like it, I used to actually think that there was Pierre Dinand and there was everybody else. You know, there was nobody even threatening for the throne. In doing this video and doing some research, I have changed my tune. There is actually a second name that continued to pop up over and over again. His name is Serge Mansau, M-A-N-S-A-U, Mansau. And Serge has some amazing bottles. I would say Pierre Dinand and Serge Mansau are probably right here, and then there's everybody else, if that makes sense. Of course, you could go back to the olden days and say, well, of course you have to pay homage and bow to Lalique and Baccarat and all these, you know, amazing bottle designers from back in the day. But Pierre Dinand's work stretches back 60 years, 70 years, it seems like. It goes way, way back. He's had a hell of a career. And as I talk about some of these, I'll tell you whether he listed it as Pierre Dinand, his name, or sometimes he lists it as Atelier Dinand, like the House of Dinand. So I don't know if he had like people working for him later on or what ended up happening. But these are fragrances in my collection that he designed. And, you know, if you follow me regularly, you know that I often talk about how fragrance for me is art in a bottle, right? As hardcore frag heads, we always love the potion that's inside, the magical juice that's inside, and how it can completely kind of take your mind away from where you are. It's the best time machine that humans have, right? But the bottle itself is also very important because, you know, Russian Adam did an interview with me and he brought up a great point. He said, one of the reasons I put so much stock and attention into the bottle, Ramsey, is the bottle sits on your shelf 99% of the time. You don't wear that fragrance every single day, right? And it just sits there, and it's supposed to look like a piece of art because it is a piece of art. So today we're going to be talking about the bottle itself. And I've done a video series in the past called Presentation Series, a presentation series. There were 2 videos done where I showed boxes and bottles. So if you're really into the bottle porn, kind of, you like watching all these different kind of bottles in someone's collection, you can go watch my presentation series as well. But this is going to focus only on Pierre Dinand's work, which, by the way, was very, very hard for me to do. Basically what I had to do, go to Parfumo, you have to click on each individual fragrance, and underneath it, it says bottle design Pierre Dinand, or it won't say it at all. So this is not a comprehensive list. Obviously, these are only fragrances that are in my collection. If you know of others, I would love for you to leave them in the comments, some of his greatest work. You know, there are some folks who only collect fragrances for the bottles. They consider the bottles to be the work of art. So this is a very cool kind of video. Obviously, it's going to be a list. We're going to talk about a lot of fragrances, so I hope you got your seatbelt on. Let's do scent of the day really quick, and then we will hop into this. So, scent of the day for me is Arolfa. I think I'm getting to a point where I'm almost ready to review this. I want to review it before the summer is out, but it's still blazing hot here in Texas in the middle of August, and this just works beautifully. It's obviously a Pierre Bourdon. I mean, even though he's not listed, this has to be Pierre Bourdon's work, I would think. I don't know. Don't quote me on that. That's just my opinion. But I would be shocked if this was not Pierre Bourdon's work. And this is how I like my aquatics. I don't like the way that the trend kind of shifted in the 90s to that, you know, I would say very thin, fresh, watery aquatic. I like my aquatics like this. There's weird stuff in here like pine and cumin, cyclamen, all these notes that kind of make it unique and different. And I actually got my hair cut today. You can't tell because I got the hat on, but the lady cutting my hair was like, "You smell amazing." And I was like, well, it's a vintage Creed, so I wouldn't even mess with it. But Aralfa, I will be doing a full review one of these days. So yes, that is from 1992 as my scent of the day. Okay, so let's hop into this. I just kind of did it alphabetical. So we just kind of take, there's no ranking to this, okay? So the first one's going to be, I would say, James Bond in a bottle. This is sort of one of the most classic, one of the classiest, and definitely a reference fougere fragrance. If you want kind of the definition of a barbershop fougere, this is what I would tell you to start with. Even the new stuff is very, very good. But if you can get a vintage bottle with the silver on the cap up here and the sticker, do that. There's a entire article on Raiders of the Lost Scent if you really want to dive into the different bottle versions and what year they switched. Great reference site, Raiders of the Lost Scent. So this is Azzaro Pour Homme from 1978, created by the great Gerard Anthony. There are a couple other perfumers that are listed as to have worked with Gerard Anthony on this. Martin Heidenreich and Richard Wirtz. For me, Gerard Anthony is always going to kind of take the crown on this one, but I know Richard Wirtz is a very, decorated perfumer as well. I don't know Mr. Heidenreich's work very much, but this is lavender, that very sharp anise in the opening, and it just dries down to that beautiful, barbershop-y, classy, professional tonka, oak moss, a little bit of leather. It's amazing. I will review this once I get my wits about me, but Azzaro Pour Homme, and you know what's interesting is there's so many bottle designs that obviously came out of this. Like this is the Azzaro Pour Homme Intense from 2015. Jonathan, who I mentioned in the beginning, sent me a sample from Azzaro Pour Homme Intense from 1992. So this is actually the second Azzaro Pour Homme Intense that they've done. They discontinued the one from 1992. Maybe like an Azzaro Through the Years video would be pretty cool. Or Azzaro Pour Homme Through the Years video would be cool. But this one, interestingly enough, if you go to Parfumo, does not have Pierre Dinand's name listed on it. The original does. And so I'm as I was doing this video, it got me thinking, like, do some of these houses sometimes change the bottle, change a thing or two? Maybe they don't have to pay royalties. I don't know how the bottle game works. I don't know how, that works, whether they just pay them once or whether they pay for every bottle sold or what. But so yes, he's not listed on this, but he is listed on the 1992 version, interestingly enough. So Azzaro Pour Homme. If you are not into vintage perfumery and you want like one place to start, you could not start at a much better place than Azzaro Pour Homme. Staying with the House of Azzaro, we're going to go with what I would consider to be one of my most, I would say, if you came to me and said, Ramsey, I want a masculine rose fragrance, this would be one of the top three I would probably just throw your way to start with. This is called Actor. And I've got the little 30 ml bottle, 25 ml bottle. This is a 25 ml. You could get these for 30 bucks on eBay back in the day. The 100 mils don't even go for that much on eBay. It's like $1 per mil almost, which is very, very cheap for a discontinued fragrance like this. But this is calamus, cardamom, bergamot, nutmeg, rose, caraway, cedarwood, jasmine, oak moss, leather, amber, and musk. And it's a dark rose, beautiful dark rose, almost like a spicy dark rose. The calamus makes it slightly unique, and I just love this. I mean, if you like things like Aramis 900, Aromatics Elixir, I would really urge you to try Actor. It's a very, very interesting take on a masculine rose. By the end of the 80s, having hardcore florals in men's fragrances was a big thing. And so that is discontinued, but still can be found without too much work. So, and you can kind of see a similar style design, a little bit of the same top, if you will, the same sort of style top with that shape. And so really check out the bottle designs on some of these, because I'll tell you what, Pierre Dinand was just an absolute master at his craft. Unfortunately, some of these you'll notice are like testers, so you don't get the whole experience with the cap, but you can kind of imagine how beautiful they would be in their full glory. Okay, next on the list, we have a very long discontinued fragrance. This is from 1971. I would love a bigger bottle of this one day. It is a creation by the great Raymond Chaillan, speaking of sort of perfumers up on Mount Rushmore, and this is called Balenciaga's Ho Hang. Now, be careful, because there was a Ho Hang club that actually did not give credit to Pierre Dinand as the bottle creator. This one did. So the original Ho Hang, and again, this is a tester. So unfortunately, this is very hard to come by. And it's a very woody, spicy. I think it shares some similarities with YSL Pome, which we will get to later on in the video, since we're going in alphabetical order, almost to the end. Also created by Raymond Chaillan, also from the early 70s. So I love those kind of connections, if you will. But man, this is one of my favorite sort of takes on a very citrusy, fresh, woody, spicy fragrance. The rosewood in here is absolutely phenomenal. There's some labdanum and benzoin and tonkas in the base, and that's what really sets it apart from YSL Pome. Just the way that the vanillas and the labdanums kind of all work together here. A classic, all-time great Balenciaga's Ho Hang. Very classy bottle too. I'm sure the larger one probably looks... These smaller ones are sometimes harder to get kind of a read on, but just very classy bottle design. Okay, next on the list, we're going to go to the House of Balmain. And I'll tell you what, if you're ever in the mood to buy like a $3,000 t-shirt, Balmain is the place to go. Their prices are absolutely outrageous on some of their stuff. But I've got a couple of their fragrances. The first one came out in 1980. It's called Ivoire de Balmain. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. Ivoire. And it was created by a perfumer named Michael High, I believe, is how you pronounce that. But this is a very complex floral chypre fragrance. Tons of florals. Tagetes, violets, orris root, lily of the valley, narcissus, ylang, carnation, jasmine, neroli, Turkish rose. I mean, did I leave anything out? Tons of aldehydes, tons of citruses, green, earthy, woody artemisia, spicy nutmeg, spicy cinnamon, spicy pepper, and then strangely in the base there's this raspberry note, which is very, very strange. So it's slightly fruity, slightly smoky. He built some frankincense into the base, so when you get that very textured oak moss, these vintages have very texture. The oak moss adds this amazing texture to it, and it's blended with beautifully, just so natural sandalwood. So you get this huge fragrance, and that's one of the hardest things about kind of breaking this one down, is it's so big, it's larger than life. And yet it kind of counterbalances that with the beautiful texture of the oak moss and the sandalwood, and then that very weird raspberry note. There's some amber, there's some vanilla, there's some vetiver. I mean, it really has everything. Just depends on where your nose wants to take you while kind of exploring this. And so this is discontinued, unfortunately, but if you're into big, bombastic chypres, this is definitely one to check out. Even though it was marketed towards women, a man could easily wear this if you don't mind wearing florals. And you can kind of see his style. There are some unique touches here and there, but very classy bottles altogether. I mean, they look beautiful on the shelf as well. Just missing some of the caps on the testers. Okay, now my favorite Balmain fragrance, hands down, and I've done a review of this, is Ebene de Balmain. Ebene de Balmain is a creation from 1983. So it's 3 years after Ivoire de Balmain. And I'll tell you what, man. Jonathan was actually telling me in our group chat, this is one of his favorite finds this year, and I agree with him. I reviewed this a year, maybe 2 years ago now. I can't remember exactly how long it's been, but I reviewed it off of a mini that Anuj sent me. And I'll tell you what, the spearmint in this, the basil, kind of the herbaceous quality in the opening, with the juniper, it's sprightly, it's fresh, but it's contrasted with labdanum, leather, frankincense, amber, moss in the base. So you have those heavier notes and you have those fresher notes. And if you like kind of the spearmint, minty, freshness in the top of some of these vintage fragrances, this is definitely one to check out. It's very earthy. That dark green color of the juice is actually a perfect, a little bit murky color. It's so, so good. Go check out my review. But I'm a big, big fan. I love the leather in this too as it dries down. Definitely, no doubt about it, the best Balmain fragrance I've ever smelled. Unfortunately, it is also discontinued, so I don't know if Balmain still makes fragrances, but I've never smelled any of their new stuff. Okay, next on the list, and I have to give a special shout out to my brother, Bekzad. There was an unboxing video 3 weeks back or so. He sent me some amazing discontinued. Everything he sent me was discontinued. There's an unboxing on the channel. I think I literally titled it like 16 discontinued fragrances or something. And he sent me a pair of fragrances from this house that I've been wanting forever, called Barishnikov. And Barishnikov, fragrances look like this. This is the bottle, but I actually have the packaging this time. I usually don't, but I kept it in the packaging, and you can see that little blue top. And when I first grabbed this bottle, I tried to take this off, and this is wrong. It actually opens up like this. So again, this is Pierre Dinand's creation. This shape of almost like the triple, almost like a little bit of an ice cream cone. But I'll tell you what, the fragrance itself, I wore it to bed. I really, really liked it. It's a very spicy oriental for the early 90s. There's a lot of herbs. It's almost like an herb salad in some ways, but it's not fresh. It's heavy. You know, it's thick. It's got layers to it. Just like the layers I mentioned here, this fragrance has layers to it. It's very spicy. The sandalwood and the spices really come through. Maybe you get a hint of something leathery in there, but the amber, I mean, it's really all about the amber and the oriental touches, just kind of, you know, wrapping everything up. And if you've ever smelled something like Jacques Fat Pour L'Homme, think about that without the fruity elements, okay? So heavier on the heavier oriental touches. This is very, very good stuff. Very impressed by this. I was not as impressed by the sport version. However, it's still a very good sport fragrance. It's just the fresher fragrances usually don't do it for me. Sometimes I force myself to wear them because of the heat. But what they've done here is, and again, I only wore these to bed one time, but they've made it much more watery. If you look at the color of the juice, and this one actually has the writing on it, it's a beautiful packaging. I mean, that is just, for a designer, I think that's gorgeous. And especially for one that I don't think was very expensive back in the day. I don't think these went for a lot of money. I think Parlux made them. So they were almost like, I wouldn't say like drugstore fragrances, but almost like on that level, you know? And it's crazy that drugstore fragrances back in the day are just killing sometimes the niche fragrances nowadays. It's unbelievable. But that's just the way it is. So imagine this sort of citrusy, gingery, sort of watery freshness. They've used a lot of eucalyptus and musks and stuff, very clean musks to kind of make it very fresh, that mid-90s feel. You know, the color will definitely remind you of the original Nautica from, I think, 92 or 94. I forget when that original Nautica was such a big hit. I had that as a little kid. There's some pepper, some cedar, and then this blossoms and rosewood. Very good sport fragrance. It's just I don't think it can compete with the OG. But I'm gonna have to give them full wears before I make any full decisions. And what's hilarious is they actually put the instructions right there on the top for morons like me who tried to open it wrong. They literally say, remove top silver grade cap only, dumbass. So that kind of cracked me up a little bit. But yes, Barishnikov Sport. And I like the little blue top. Pierre Dinand, I think he's a genius. Okay, next on the list, we're going to go to the house of Basil. And I'll tell you what, if you like fragrances like Jacques Bogart, the original Jacques Bogart from 1975. If you like Paco Rabanne Pour Homme from 1972, this is from 87, okay? But it wears like, you know, one of those early to mid 70s fragrances. It's called Bazil Wo. And unfortunately, I, again, don't have a cap because I have a tester, but this is a beautiful spicy green fragrance. Lots of sort of oily rosemary, lavenders, sort of dry, leathery thyme with green galbanum. There's little hints of fruit from blackcurrant, oak moss, and this leathery kind of dry down. Bazil Wo, if you like traditional fragrances like some of those I mentioned, definitely worth checking out. I don't know if you would just define this as a Chypre or a Fougere, but sometimes I think it has elements of both, but it's very, very good. Very good stuff from Bazil Wo. Now, they have a flanker, and this is one I would like to maybe get another bottle of. If you look at the pictures, some of the bottles have this very clear color juice. My juice is much darker, which makes me think that maybe it's turned just a little bit. That's the risk of buying sort of fragrances that are partials, right? And so this was a tester. I got it for a great price. But I would love to get maybe just an unused bottle to compare, because I think this one is not at its tip top. It takes a little bit to kind of get going. The top notes seem a little bit but I think what they've done is they've kind of started to play on the sort of amber fougere category, which was becoming so popular. Zeno had already come out. Chanel had released Pour Monsieur cologne concentrate, which did have real oak moss in the late 80s. And so imagine Tiffany for men, maybe going in that direction, much more powdery, maybe slightly fruity, a little spicy, a little oriental. And so it's moving away from the traditional Bazil Wo, but it does have little green hints here and there. But I want to get another bottle just to kind of compare and see what if I'm right about that bottle. But Bazil Wo Forte, obviously they're the same bottle, so Pierre Dinand gets credit for both, and they definitely look better with the cap. But I still think the presentation is just class all the way through. Okay. Next on the list is one of my all-time favorite bottle creations by him. And you may laugh at this, but I love this bottle. And the cap plays a big part of it. So this is a 200, and I also like bigger bottles because I have big hands. This is a 200 ml bottle from the house of Borsalino. So this is Borsalino from 1984. And this is an Italian fragrance. So first of all, this is Italian through and through. If you said, Ramsey, pick like one fragrance from your collection that you would think maybe, Paul Castellano would smell like from back in the 80s, this would be my scent. Because it is so Italian. It's got that sort of sage, clary sage, lavender thing. There are some old school florals in here, like some carnations, cyclamen, but the way that they did that fern, because, this is a fougere through and through. But fougères are supposed to replicate the smell of a fern, right? But ferns don't really have a smell, but that's kind of the job of a fougere. And the way that they've done it is so unbelievably Italian. It's just got that pizzazz about it. And the moss and the leather and the dry down. It doesn't last very long. It's only like a 5-hour fragrance, 4 to 5 hours, really. Maybe 6 sometimes, but usually 4 to 5, I'm ready to reapply by 4 hours. This is one of those that I just carry a decant. It's a splash anyways and just spray away. It is discontinued, unfortunately, but one of the things I love about it is the cap reminds me of like a bowling hat, from back in the day. It reminds me like this bottle just looks like it's just going to put its hat on and kick your ass. And I think Borsalino was famous for their hats. So that even makes this bottle's hat even more of a little bit of an icon. But I love this bottle for some reason. It just seems so classy to me. It's got the space to hold it and everything. Borsalino by Borsalino from 1984. A gem. Now, probably this next one is one where a lot of folks will be like, no, this is the masterpiece, Ramsey. And it's the original Obsession. And of course, you've got this kind of spaceship bottle that Pierre Dinand designed, almost like a kidney shape. And Obsession for Women, of course, I reviewed it on the channel. I did a full review. You can check it out. The vanilla, the green touches, the bits of peach, the just exotic spices, the amber into the dry down, a little bit of civet. It just feels like it's furry like the underbelly of a cat, but it's got claws. And Obsession for Women, a man could easily wear, from 1985. This is a brilliant bottle. Probably will be one of most people's favorites from his creations. Obsession for Men, interestingly, this is the very first Obsession for Men, the cologne spray. Cologne spray was the very first one. Then they went to Eau de Toilette. And then you could kind of follow along, after Calvin Klein Cosmetics, it changed a couple times. But the built-in sprayer, you can see, was the same kind of color as the cap on the older bottles, that kind of, caramel brown, if you will. And both are beautiful, but the women's bottle, I love built-in sprayers, though, because you can just pick it up and spray, but the women's bottle is awesome with that spaceship look. And then we've got a couple other discontinued fragrances, unfortunately. But this next one is called Nino Cerruti Pome. And this is another one where I would love to get like a sealed backup of this one day. 1979. It's a very floral, probably one of my favorite sort of masculine floral fragrances for men. Some people mention Givenchy's Encensé. This blows Encensé out of the water, in my opinion. It's so much more detailed. It does have that little mint, green opening, but the galbanum mixed with the stone pine and the thyme and the fruity notes in here, it really is, there's a lot of fragrances that I would say, sort of play off of each other, you know, in a certain time frame. So you get one fragrance and it becomes popular, and then you get a lot of fragrances that are very similar. This is kind of one of one. It's very unique. It really, there's nothing else I can compare it to except for Encensé by Givenchy, which is also discontinued, but came out like in the 90s, early 90s. And this was 1979. I mean, this was really sort of its own. It was individualistic, unique, and the bottle is fantastic. I don't know if you can really make that out, but it's almost like there's a little bit of a bubble on both sides of the bottle, kind of popping out. And the box, which I wish I had to show you, the box, it almost looks like there is also a bubble on the box, but it's red, and all around it is blue. So it's this contrast of red and blue, and he continued that theme with Fair Play. So actually what's interesting is, if you go to Parfumo, Fair Play lists as his creation, and the bottle's the same. So Nino Trudy Pour Homme doesn't actually list as a Pierre Dinand. They must have missed it, because this one does list as a Pierre Dinand creation. So I'm not sure. They probably just missed it is my guess. But Fair Play, if you want like one of my all-time favorite flankers, I really think that this fragrance was almost like one of the very first takes on that modern amber fougere. It's hard to call something older than me modern. But yeah, this is 1984, and they really started to turn into that amber fougere category that culminated with things like Heritage and Escada Pour Homme and all that good stuff. This feels like a very early iteration of that. Lavender, lots of beautiful citruses in the top, very spicy. It's got basil, carnation, which I love. I wish more masculine fragrances used carnation, pine, geranium, amber, cedarwood, leather, moss, tonka bean, and vanilla. So you're getting that ambers, tonka, vanilla in the base. The warming bits of the base is what really characterizes the amber fougere category. Absolutely brilliant. Okay, it is time for a water break. Uno momento. We're almost 30 minutes in and we still got a lot to go. We're probably like a third of the way done. Okay, next on the list we have a Daniel Hector fragrance. One of the few sealed backups that I have, and this is called Caractère. Now, interestingly enough, Caractère is still made. The new bottles have this weird, almost like 3 stripes right here. So if you want the vintage, don't get the one with the 3 stripes on the bottle. It also says, well, I don't know what the new bottle, looks like, but definitely try to get the one without the 3 stripes if you can. I'm sure there's some other ways to tell as well. 85 proof, maybe that's a giveaway. I'm not sure who is the distributor of Daniel Hector Caractère right now, but I'll tell you what, if you like things like Antaeus, I mean, if you like the early 80s leathery castoreum fragrances, Caractère is a must sniff. It is brilliant. The Artemisia in the top, very earthy and woody and green and a little bit scratchy. You know, when this hits you, it hits you hard in the opening, but it settles to something beautifully spicy and woody. I'm a huge fan of Caractère. Again, enough to have a sealed backup, and yeah, very rarely do I have sealed backups in my collection because I wear my stuff. But yeah, there's the example of the older packaging, if you will, for those of you interested. But not too old. It does have a barcode, so it can't be too old. So Caractère, beautiful bottle by Pierre Dinand. And then we've got maybe one of the all-time iconics, and I think this may be the very first bottle we come upon where it's a collaboration between a couple different bottle designers. The first bottle designer is named Catherine Krunas, and then it's listed as Atelier Dinand. So this is like the house of Pierre Dinand. And this is Dolce & Gabbana's Pour Homme, the original shitty sticker on the front that I literally had to tape because it was coming off, from 1994. This is spicy, woody, one of the best sort of fresh tobacco. Like if you're into fresh tobacco, the spices in here, and really one of the keys is the way that the tobacco blends with the woods blends with the lavender. There is tarragon, one of my secret ingredients, and iris. And iris makes it posh, you know? It's very Italian, but posh Italian, if you will. Maybe this is like this is like the son of the guy who I was mentioning in the 1980s, right? He's graduated to now the 1990s and wearing Dolce & Gabbana Pour Homme. It's beautiful, absolutely beautiful. I could totally see a guy like in a tracksuit, you know exactly where I'm going with that, wearing that. Dolce & Gabbana Pour Homme is just absolutely brilliant. I will review that one of these days. Unfortunately, that version is discontinued. They've re-released it, it seems like a million times, but if you can get the original, they call it Euro Italia bottle, I would highly urge you to check that out. Okay, now next on the list is probably, man, it's so hard, but again, and it's a 250 ml bottle, but it's one of my favorite bottles in the collection. And this is called Dunhill's Blend 30. This is just iconic to me. I mean, the cap is so important. You can see how missing the cap almost, you know, you lose the rest of the design. So that's why some of those testers really hurt this video. I wish I had caps for all of them, but this, and this fragrance in particular, is one of my all-time favorite sort of takes on a fougere, because it takes that classic fougere structure and, you know, you've got the lavender, you've got the oak moss, you've got the tonka bean, and there is some carnation, of course. It is an old school fragrance from 1978, maybe one of the greatest years of masculine perfumery ever. And they've added this kind of tobacco-y smoke, so there's no tobacco listed in here, but it smells like tobacco because there's this brilliant use of hay. And what's so interesting is whenever I interviewed Liz Moores, I interviewed her twice, once a couple years ago and once just this weekend I interviewed her. So go check out those interviews if you've never watched them before. But she, oh my God, man, Dunhill Blend 30, fuck me. She talked about in creating Tobacco Rose, anytime she used actual Tobacco Absolute, it flattened the rest of the notes. And she said one of the tricks that she had to learn was to create her own kind of tobacco accord using other things like hay, okay? And so it's interesting because this does not smell flat at all. This smells so lively. There's real ambergris in the base in here. It is unbelievable, unbelievable. Very hard to describe, but unbelievable. I'll try my best to review that one of these days, but Dunhill Blend 30 is, I mean, one of the most coveted bottles in my collection right there. Okay, next on the list, we're gonna go to a new edition, but from, I've only sprayed this one time, but from, it is discontinued, unfortunately, but it's from 1983, but the bottle is absolutely stunning. It's from Fabergé, and it's called Adas. And I believe it was Anuj that sent me this, so thank you, Anuj. The great Anuj. And I believe, anyways, it was. I hope it was. But Adas is a beautiful floral chypre. It's really stunning. If you don't mind the florals done in like maybe a traditionally feminine style, there's lots of white florals like jasmine, I would guess, maybe a little bit of tuberose, but there's orange, oak moss, all these different florals combining with lovely, lovely buttery sandalwood and spices. There's probably some labdanum in the base, and it's just beautiful, you know. Adas is one of those floral chypres that if you've never sniffed it, I would highly encourage it. Speaking of chypres that are worth a sniff, speaking of spicy chypres, this is the original Fendi fragrance. There is some disagreement on when it came out. Some say the mid-80s, like 84, 85. Others say 87. So I'm just going to go with 87 because that's what Parfumo says. But this bottle is iconic in its sort of design. There's many perfume books that will talk about the original Fendi. And Pierre Dinand built a knockout with the built-in sprayer. The design, everything is just beautiful. And this is also a spicy floral chypre. There's lots of aldehydes in the beginning. There's rosewood, which is one of my all-time favorite wood notes. And this is also a collaboration between Catherine Crunas and Pierre Dinand. So obviously they had something going on in their design combo. Maybe she designed like the plastic parts and he designed the bottle. I have no idea how they split the work. But the original Fendi is amazing. And again, Firmenich was the creator of this. I don't know who the perfumers were, but I know they were Firmenich perfumers. And so this is the Eau de Toilette. I believe they also have a pure parfum, which I would love to smell one day, and an eau de parfum, but I'm very happy with the Eau de Toilette that I have. So the original Fendi from 1987, according to Parfumo. Okay, next on the list, we're going to go to the definition of smoke moss, and this is Franchesco Smalto. And look at this bottle. This is absolutely stunning. I love this bottle. It's so classy, and yet, you know, each one of these, even though they just seem like they're little bits and pieces here and there, like the Cerruti popped out instead of popped in, and yet it gives it an entirely different personality. This has an outie, this has an innie, but I love them both. And Franchesco Smalto, if you're into, oh my God, you know, if you're into leathery sort of fougères, this is a must sniff. The Anise, the Tarragon, 1987, brilliant stuff. It's got the old school carnation. It's green, it's spicy, and it has that smoke moss, as Rich Mitch says in the base. Perfect way to describe it. Definite man in a suit is what comes to mind. Man in a classic, maybe even tweed blazer, you know, something like that. It's beautiful. Franchesco Smalto. Some say it's Smalto Pour Homme, but Parfumo literally just says Franchesco Smalto. So maybe it's the eponymous name of the house. I don't know. And I'm going to give credit to Malto Smalto, even though it's not listed as a Pierre Dinand creation. I mean, you can see that they've obviously taken this mold and then used it to create Malto Smalto. And if you like things like, you know, sandalwood heavy fragrances, if you've ever smelled Patu Pour Homme Privé, you know, something along those lines, this is a fragrance that was done in like a cheaper version of that. It's a Parlux fragrance, so it's kind of a, you know, drugstore-esque version of the high-end Patu Pour Homme. But Malto Smalto uses lavender, lemon, rosemary, coriander, clary sage, geranium, jasmine, lily of the valley, amber, cedar, musk, and sandalwood. And some say this came out in 1992. Some say 1993. So we have a disagreement here as well. But I'm going to give Pierre Dinand credit for this because even though he's not listed, my guess is if you look at these bottles, they seem the same. This is just kind of painted in that matte black. So if they're not giving him credit for this, they obviously took his design and just recreated it. You know, maybe to avoid paying royalties. I don't know how that would work. I don't know how, maybe they just buy the mold and then they can do things like changing the colors without, I don't know. I have no idea how that works, but that definitely deserves to be given credit to the great Pierre Dinand. Okay, next on the list we have some Givenchy's, and these are two of the original Givenchy fragrances for men, called Monsour Xoni from 1959, and this is a very classical up and down bottle here. And then we've got Monsour Xoni Haute Concentration, and this is my preferred of the two. I mean, if you look at the juice color, this has much more going on for it. And while this is still very good, it's very light. And you know, men in the 50s, even the late 50s, weren't supposed to wear fragrance. It wasn't like, you know, men didn't see themselves as being able to wear fragrance. They considered that to be a woman's thing. So when a man did put on a fragrance, it was supposed to be extremely light, like almost like you put it on, it's gone by the time you get to the office, right? Well, now we fast forward to 1983, and they have fixed that issue. Sorry, actually I lied. I don't know the release year for this one, but let's just say it was the 70s or 80s. So they've kind of fixed the issue, and they've amped up some of the heavier ingredients, the spices. Some of the base notes are much heavier, and I much prefer the Haute Concentration, but very classical up and down bottle, but absolutely brilliant stuff. So I'll review those one of these days. Okay, again, I wish I had the cap on this one. It would really help out, but I don't, so you're just gonna have to make do with the bottle itself. This is Givenchy number 3. Givenchy 3. And Givenchy 3 is created by the great Raymond Chaillan. And I'll tell you what. Oh, and Jean-Francois Lati. So Jean-Francois Lati and Raymond Chaillan of IFF created this. If you like green chypres, okay, so that 70s trend that I was mentioning, which started with YSL Y, which is on this list. Pierre Dinand did that bottle as well. really took off in the 1970s. And this was like as it was really just leaving the runway. This is just 1970. So 1971, of course, we had the very famous Chanel number 19. We had Private Collection by Estee Lauder. I mean, it just went on and on. The green fragrances in the 70s were to die for. This is one such fragrance. The galbanum in here with the aldehydes and all of the beautiful florals. And the thing that really makes this for me is the base is animalic. It's not light, okay? It's not ethereal. It's filled with heavy resins, myrrhs that make it very earthy, licoricey almost, with this castoreum thing that makes it animalic. You might be surprised at the animalic side of this because it's a chypre, but it's an animalic green floral chypre. Very, very underrated, Givenchy 3, and unfortunately discontinued. But I heard they try to reissue it with very limited success from what I heard. Okay. Next on the list is probably one of the most iconic flankers ever created, and Pierre Dinand did the bottle. It is Drakkar Noir, and that shape of the bottle in and of itself. Now, it's interesting because if you pull up other Guy Laroche fragrances that clearly have this shape, Pierre Dinand is not listed as the perfumer. So again, I'm not really sure how this all works, but if he designed the shape of this bottle and made Drakkar Noir famous in a way with the bottle's a big part of the fragrance. If they use the exact same bottle, but like make it clear for Horizon, for example, here, I'll show you an example. So Horizon is a fragrance that clearly uses a very similar, if not the same shape as Drakkar Noir. But this is credited to somebody else as far as who created the bottle. So they just took the shape, added some sort of, you know, plasticky, icy, watery things on here, and bam, new bottle. Really? I don't really understand how that works, but it's an interesting thing to maybe explore in the future. But Drakkar Noir is like the sort of it was kind of the gold standard for freshness in the 1980s, early 80s. 1982, Pierre Wagner did Drakkar Noir, tons of dihydromercenol, you know, oak moss, rosemaries, lavenders, all this good stuff. I'll review it one of these days. Really smells like a proper aromatic fougere, and really became the gold standard of freshness in the 1980s. So much so that when Pierre Bourdon released Cool Water, one of the things that he says, I really wanted to distinguish, to, you know, set myself apart from Drakkar Noir. I didn't want to be associated with it at all. I wanted to be, you know, I never wanted someone to say I copied Drakkar Noir. That's how influential it was, that perfumers were trying to sort of avoid it because it was so influential. Okay, next on the list we have one of the best Jacques Bogart fragrances ever created, and I actually did a comparison video between these two. And again, if you like fragrances like Paco Rabanne Pour Homme, imagine like a chypre version of Paco Rabanne Pour Homme. Paco Rabanne's a fougere, but imagine if you made a chypre with Paco Rabanne Pour Homme. That is Bogart, by Jacques Bogart. And I did a comparison video between the vintage and the newer juice. Newer juice is still fantastic. Unfortunately, I don't know if they, you know, had a hard time producing them or something went wrong or what, but this became very rare all of a sudden. Now, it says it's still in production, but you used to be able to find this for like 20 bucks. Now you're paying like $100 or something, and I'm not really sure why. There's 70 ml bottles, I think, which is 90 ml bottle. Very strange, but this is an old 30 ml bottle. And so, I mean, look at the design, right? It seems so simple, and yet it's so classy. Everything works brilliantly with the B, the Bogart B on top. I just think I think his designs are, some would say simple, I would say classy, in a very Art Deco kind of way. You know, this has this Empire State Building flair to it, if you will. It's a beautiful, and the fragrance itself, my God, talk about smoke moss again. This was 1975. This was a decade, 12 years before Franchesco Smalto. So yes, I'm a big fan of Bogart, by Jacques Bogart. Okay, now moving on to probably my new crush. And again, this is thanks to Bekzad. He sent me this in the unboxing video that I did with Barishnikov. And so this is, I mean, man, when I unboxed this, my heart literally skipped a beat. So this is Monsour Courtier, the Eau de Toilette, which is very, very hard to find. And I always mess up the name. Monsour Couturier. I need to practice. Slow down. Couturier. So 1976, this is a very leathery, spicy fragrance that feels like it, oh, I can smell it, I swear. Oh my God, man, it is so unbelievable. If you like things like Guerlain's Derby, okay, Parfums, Parfums Wheel put out a fragrance called, I think it was called Ville Pour Homme, in the early 80s, like 1980. This came out in 1976. I could clearly see this being an inspiration. And if you look, this line that runs straight through the fragrance continues to run through the cap as well. And it's got the Jean Couturier logo on the top. And it also runs throughout the back. So it's got this kind of, you know, almost airplane swept wing feeling to the bottle. What an absolutely beautiful, stunning bottle. And the fragrance is, it matches. The fragrance matches the bottle. Oh my God, man. Oh, wow. It's like a creamy leather. It's like a creamy, spiced leather with tobacco. It is, I mean, if this wasn't so rare, I think Raymond Chaillan would get much more credit for this, because I think this really influenced the leather fragrances of the 80s. And I actually have the aftershave as well. And so shaving, putting on the aftershave, and look at the aftershave. It actually came in a spray. So I would literally just spray this on my face, rub it in, and then put the cologne on. They could smell me from space. I mean, they could probably literally smell me from space. And so there's the aftershave. But the eau de toilette bottle is on another level, man. That stuff is wow. So thank you, Bexad. What a gift. Okay. Continuing on our Pierre Dinand educational video, we go to the house of Jean Desprez, and this is the eau de cologne version of Versailles Pour Homme. If you follow my channel, you'll know that I reviewed Bala Versailles about a year or two ago on the channel, and so Versailles Pour Homme, this is the masculine version, very, very sort of green, woody, mossy, leathery, maybe slightly fruity. But imagine if you added some of these elements with this top of pimento and what smells like it took a lot from the original Aramis, the original Aramis from the 1960s or whatever it was. This really feels like it borrowed elements of that, you know, 15 years later, but made it a little bit fruity, added more green touches to it, and it keeps kind of this leathery frankincense, styraxy kind of thing in the base. Very, very interesting. Now, this is the eau de cologne, as I've said. There's an eau de toilette, which I've never smelled. I would like to one day, but, and again, speaking of like beauty through simplicity, just look at the bottle. I mean, the crossroads, the Versailles Pour Homme name right dead smack in the middle, the black writing contrasting with the black cap beautifully, the sort of lines running through the back and the front of the bottle. He likes continuity throughout his bottles, you can tell. And, you know, some people may be looking and saying, so what? What's the big deal? Well, I'll tell you the big deal. The big deal is that when you go to some of these new niche houses that are charging $300, $400, $500 a bottle, they're all in the same damn bottle, you know? So you're going to pay $500 for something, and it's in the exact same bottle. Back then, everyone got a different bottle. Everyone got its own bottle. All the Guerlains were put in their own bottle. Après Londe had its own bottle. Samsara had its own bottle, you know, so forth and so on. And it's just, you know, goes back to trying to squeeze every penny out of it. You should have a bottle for every single fragrance. Now, the bottle is the most expensive part of the fragrance creating process. That's why those houses do that. They just create one mold, and then Tom Ford sticks every single thing in the same bottle, right? So I understand why they do it, but I miss the days of stuff like this where, you know, this bottle was the bottle for Versailles Pour Homme, and that's it. You know, and that's why I think vintage perfume is the best. My heart will always be with vintage, in my opinion. So, okay, continuing on. continuing on, we have a fragrance from the house of Kitzia. Now, Pierre Dinand was like the Kitzia king. I think he did every single bottle for the house of Kitzia. And I'll tell you my favorite. Again, one of my all-time favorites is coming up. But the first one is called K de Kitzia. This is the eau de toilette. I also have the eau de parfum. The bottles look the same, but the cap feels like it's made of like real glass. You would think it's like plasticky. No, this is heavy glass feeling bottle. It's actually really beautiful. And it's a very floral, spicy Chypre created by Maurice Roussel. One of his earlier works. Speaking of Maurice Roussel, if you've never smelled his Ispahan from 1977, I am in love with that stuff. I just discovered it recently. I actually think it's even better than K de Kitzia. K de Kitzia is a really good animalic Chypre, lots of florals. Ispahan is on another level. It's almost like a distorted take on opium, which we will also talk about today. But K de Kitzia is very, very good. That's a Maurice Roussel. Now, Firmenich created a fragrance for Kitzia. I don't know who the perfumer was. This is probably my least favorite Kitzia, which is crazy because it's Kitzia Uomo, which you would think I would love the most, but it's a very strange combination of green notes in here that really puts me off. The pine needle doesn't put me off, I would say. I just haven't come around to loving it yet. Maybe I never will. But it's this weird take of spices and green notes. There's basil on the top, pine in the heart, oak moss in the base. It does turn slightly leathery, but I would just rather wear polo green is one of my problems from 1978. So this is 83. Obviously, the pine needles inspired by polo green, they just didn't do it as well, in my opinion. But the bottle's beautiful. Again, you can see everything, simplicity. He did the built-in sprayer again on this one. And so, yes, I mean, the bottles are little works of art. They look beautiful on the shelves. Now, all right, now we're coming up on my, again, maybe one of my all-time favorite bottles on here. I think if you just rate it based on the complexity of the bottle, I think this may be my favorite Pierre Dinand. Oh, it's going to be really close as we come to the end. One of my favorites. This is Tetro Alcala. Look at that. I mean, that is, to me, just an absolute true work of art. True work of art. This is the splash bottle. The spray is cool as well. The color scheme is kind of the same, but the spray is much more simplistic. There's something about the splash, man. And there's something about the splash. It's got a screw on top. Oh my fucking God. This is one of my all-time favorite feminine marketed fragrances. It's really one of the fragrances that changed everything for me, you know. I discovered it on the channel. Early on when I had the channel, I discovered this. There was like everything before and everything after. You can go watch my very first impression of this when I got on here and I was like, what in the world did I just discover? But Tetro Alcala, based on the beautiful opera house in Milan, I believe. And man, I mean, the bottle, that is just an absolute work of art, in my opinion. Okay, next on the list, we've got Crazy Kitzia. Speaking of works of art, I mean, this is still absolutely beautiful. This is the eau de parfum, I believe. I also have the eau de toilette. Yeah, this is the eau de parfum. The eau de parfum I have is a splash. I got both bottles. They were both 100 mils, so I got both bottles for $80, which is just insane value for money. If you like, oh yeah, if you can just imagine Obsession by Calvin Klein, just imagine Obsession and Must de Cartier from the early 80s with that peach note had a baby, and that's Crazy Kitzia. And Crazy Kitzia is a Dominique Ropion. Dominique Ropion is listed as the perfumer here. This is also one of those collabs between Catherine Krunas and Atelier Dinand, the House of Dinand. So, sorry, Dinand. I guess I should be pronouncing it the same way every single time. I honestly don't know how to pronounce it. Let's just stick with Dinand. But yes, Crazy Kitzia almost has this apple look to it, if you will. Yeah, almost like it's hanging on it. Almost like it's, if you know the Apple logo, there's a little bit of that Apple logo in here, at least I think. Very interesting bottle. Okay, next on the list, we've got a built-in sprayer fragrance from the house of Marbert, and this is called Marbert Homme. So again, you can almost see this Art Deco style, very clean. He loves putting these little lines on the bottles. You also saw it. You saw it in so many fragrances, really, but I mentioned the little lines on Franchesco's smto. You see the line on Fendi, and where that line is put obviously makes a big deal. You also see it on Azzaro, this time with chrome. And so you're kind of probably getting a good feel for his style. It's a very classy bottle. Marbert Homme, unfortunately discontinued from 1988. I'll review it one of these days. Very spicy, woody, green fragrance. Very well done. Very well done. Okay, now one of my favorite bottles. I love this bottle. I think it's just brilliant, and it just so happens to be the final fragrance, the last opus of the great Edmund Rudnitska, and this is called Ocean Rain. So Ocean Rain. Take a look at this bottle. Tell me this doesn't just remind you of like a sunset in the back, shimmering on the water, and it's just perfectly placed. I mean, something so simple can make such a big deal on the bottle. And Ocean Rain is issued for the house of Mario Valentino, which most people think that's Valentino. It's not. It's not the Valentino. That's Mario Valentino, which was like some shit mall company. They were like almost like the Buckle. If you know the Buckle in the United States, it was almost like the Buckle. Like imagine the greatest perfumer of all time releasing a fragrance for the Buckle. No offense to the Buckle, but it's just not what you think of when you think of fragrances. But they basically let him do whatever he wants. They were like, you're the greatest perfumer of all time. Do whatever the hell you want. He was like, this is what I want to do. And they said, okay. And Pierre Dinand did the bottle. It's a very floral, spicy take on an aquatic. I've often said it smells like the oceans before life, you know, when it's like a pool of everything floating around. Like I just imagine foam on the top of the oceans, like this incubating ground of life. Or the marine notes feel like, you know, it's like a shark just killed a seal nearby and there's little drops of blood in the water. There's that weird sort of almost coppery feeling, like you put maybe like a piece of aluminum against your tongue, or there's this strangeness to this, but it's an aquatic, and it's this and Arolfa, and I truly believe that. And again, you have to remember, Pierre Bourdon is the pupil of Edmund Rudnitska. Edmund Rudnitska was the master. Pierre Bourdon was the pupil. This was 1990. This was 1992. I truly believe this inspired this. Truly, truly believe it. And maybe I'll talk about that a little bit when I review Arolfa. But man, if you want to see an aquatic, most people, they hear the word aquatic, they think boring. Boring, aquatic. This proves the opposite. In fact, if you ever smelled some of his early works for Dior, Diorella, for example, or if you smelled the fragrance he made as a bespoke fragrance for his wife that she wore until the day he died, and then she basically allowed Frederick Malle to release it to the world. She said, I shouldn't keep this. It should be released to the world. Well, he was playing with things like Cologne and all this stuff in the 1960s, decades before it became popular. He was so far ahead of the curve. Perfumers didn't really start playing catch up until like the 90s to him, late 80s, early 90s. And he had a very specific style of the way that he liked to do it. And you smell it in here. If you smell Diorella, you'll smell bits and pieces of Diorella in here. And Ocean Rain it really is something. It may not be everyone's cup of tea, but as a reference, this is very important. And again, the bottle, that's why we're here. The bottle is, I love it. I absolutely love it. Ocean Rain. Okay. Now, this next one is a fragrance that I often told people who, you know, didn't want to spend a lot of money, but they wanted to like dip their toe into the vintage realm. This is called Maxim's Pour Homme. This has been discontinued for like decades, and yet for some reason, you could still find bottles floating around for like 30 bucks or something, 40 bucks. It's so good too. It's lavender, carnation, and bergamot in the top, amber, cedarwood, jasmine, and sandalwood in the heart. leather, musk, and oak moss in the base, and there is castoreum in here. I would bet there's some castoreum in here because it has a little bit of that earthy, warming, you know, touch, that slightly metallic twang castoreum gives you. And if you contrast, look at that metallic cap and the metallic M for Maxims. If you don't know the story about Maxims, God, I love this stuff. Maxims is a very famous restaurant in Paris. So famous that when Christian Dior, the man, used to go have his meals there, he used to get this dessert all the time became very popular and popularized itself into Vanilla Diorama, I believe, that Dior released as a perfume a couple years ago. And Maxim's is the very famous restaurant. And there is it's been passed around. Pierre Cardin very famously owned Maxim's for a little bit back when Pierre Cardin was just like buying everything. He was like licensing his name to everything and buying everything. But yeah, so, and again, let's take another look at the bottle. So you see almost like this doorway imagery on the outside. It's very subtle, but it's very classy. It almost makes just what would seem like a boring bottle extraordinary, in my opinion. And that's one of the reasons why I think Pierre Dinand is the GOAT of bottles. Now, again, like I said, I used to think it was him and no one else, but I really am onto this Serge Mansau guy. So if you guys like this video, I'll do another one for Serge's bottles. He's got some amazing creations as well. Okay, next on the list we have Missoni Uomo. Speaking of taking something very simple and making it amazing through just little lines here and there, something so simple. And this is a very strange, spicy leather. It's very, very strange. It's got some green notes, but it has a lot of clove. The box almost looks like, if you just took the soil and cut deep into the earth and you see the different layers, and some colors are light brown, some are dark brown, some are black, you know, and you see all these different layers in the soil. That's what the box looks like. And strangely, that's what the fragrance smells like. It smells like this weird earthiness, but then they all blend together. The leather and Cistus IFF is the perfumer on this one. It's very, very hard. This one's a very hard fragrance to describe. Very, very tough. It is a leather fragrance, but I don't know if it's a leather fragrance like I've ever smelled before. It's very, very spicy, but in a strange way. The galbanum and the clove make it very unique. But I do like the cistus, and it does have real ambergris in the base, and the leather in the dry down is very nice. It's not one of my favorites, but it's unique. Okay, next on the list. Speaking of, if you like fragrances like Paco Rabanne Pour Homme, this is definitely one to check out. This is called Captain Molyneux. Someone made a joke, Captain America's French brother across the pond. I've never been able to get that out of my head. Captain Molyneux. And there's kind of the note listing on the back. But if you pull this up, the Eau de Toilette, it'll show actually a different bottle on Parfumo. But if you look and you switch it from the Eau de Toilette to the aftershave lotion, this is actually what pops up. But this is the Eau de Toilette. So they actually had different bottles for different times. The cap looks amazing too. I wish I had the cap with this one. But you still get the idea. Very green, spicy, lots of vetiver, cedar, myrtle, provincial lavender, patchouli, Scots pine, Zanzibar clove, thyme, ginger, cistus, Ceylon cinnamon. So it is a fougere through and through. If you like Paco Rabanne Pour Homme, I would urge you to try that. Okay, next on the list is, again, probably one of my favorite bottles on this list. Not because of the bottle itself that I have, but because of the limited edition bottle that I know Pierre Dinand created. And this is Moschino's Pour Homme. And yes, this bottle is beautiful. You can see kind of the detailing on the cap, the spades, the beautiful gold imagery of Moschino. But what is amazing about this one, and this is discontinued, unfortunately. If you like Bel Ami, I would urge you to try this one as well. Lots of spicy animalic leather. Oh, it's beautiful. And but he actually created a bottle that had two atomizers, one on this end and one on this end, which I think is just the craziest thing I've ever seen. But what a crazy bottle design, the dual atomizers. So again, Pierre Dinand just cementing himself as the bottle goat in my mind. Okay, so we move on. My old man signature scent, one of the most classic bottles ever in my opinion, Paco Rabanne Pome from 1972. This is the spray version. This is the splash version. And you can see anything with the raised R, I would recommend. There's many different versions of this, but anything with the raised R. This has that sort of, imagine you're smelling like fruit jelly, fruit conserve in a fougere, okay? So it's got this very strange honeyed kind of thing in the base with the rosewood. Oh man, and you know, of course I can't help but think of my dad whenever I smell this, and it is still in production. The new stuff, I'd maybe tell you to go for a vintage, but he also did the sport version. So they had a sport version that came out in 1986 called Sport de Paco Rabanne, and Sport de Paco Rabanne uses things like iris. I don't believe there was any iris in the original Paco Rabanne. And a couple other things to kind of set it apart, some tarragon, green notes, more citruses, lemons, mandarin orange, bergamots, petitgrain. I don't think there's any petitgrain or those kind of citruses in the top of Paco Rabanne Pome. Maybe a little bit, but not like in the sport version. So just imagine exactly what you would expect from Paco Rabanne in a sport version. I believe Rosendu Matu did the sport version, and Jean Martel was the perfumer of the original Paco Rabanne Pome. Okay, next on the list is a fragrance from the house of Pomelato, and this is an unknown one. It's called Pomelato Uomo. And again, simple bottle, the strange little slight line of silver makes a big difference in the design and the style. Pierre Dinand had his ways. Artemisia, fruity notes, green notes, rosemary, bergamot. It's definitely a fougere, but it's got this very strange spicy freshness to it. There's a lot of freshness to it. There's a fern note. Well, they say there's a fern note, but I don't think fern actually has a smell. So it's supposed to smell like fern, with fir, tarragon, geranium, jasmine, moss, cedar, amber, leather, musk, and patchouli. And beautiful spice. If you like spicy, fresh takes on a fougere, this is definitely one to try out. Pomelato Uomo, unfortunately discontinued. Next on the list is one that is back in production. I heard it was discontinued for a while, but it shows back in production, and this is another collaboration between Catherine Krunas and Pierre Dinand. This is called Tiffany for Men, and this one's actually supposed to look like a belt buckle. So this right here is supposed to look like a man's belt buckle, right in the middle of his belt right here. And they did a beautiful job creating this. If you like fragrances, oh yeah, this is like a sort of powdery, more ambery version of Chanel Pour Monsieur, which I just did an unboxing of Chanel for Men, the original Chanel for Men, before they renamed it Pour Monsieur a month or two ago. Go check that out. But yeah, Tiffany for Men, if you like those kind of spicy, powdery fragrances, beautiful orris in there, I'd recommend checking that out. Okay, next on the list, we have a fragrance from the house of Valentino. And this one's called Very Valentino for Men. Again, unfortunately discontinued. I think Procter & Gamble last marketed this. Yes, so mine's the Unilever. So there was, I think there were 3 different versions of this. There was an original, like, Valentino distributor. This came out in 1999, if I'm not mistaken. Then Unilever took it over. Then Procter & Gamble took it over and discontinued it. So this is sage, anise, nutmeg, coriander, tobacco, lavender, Brazilian rosewood, carnation, caraway, musk, amber, sandalwood, cedar, and resins in the base. Harry Fremont is the perfumer here. If you like stuff like this from a couple years before, this is 1994. This is 1999. Obviously, Valentino's watching Dolce & Gabbana, both being Italian designers. And so very spicy, very woody. The sage in here is beautiful. And I'll get around to reviewing this one of these days. But yeah, again, you can see the simplicity, and you can see how he likes using these little separators, you know. This silver is a big separator in the design, but very clean lines. Just a beautiful bottle. Beautiful bottle. Really a fan of his work. And it goes on. Next on the list, one of the all-time classic bottles for a classic jewelry house. Actually, this jewelry house is, I mean, if you listen to a rap song nowadays, you'll probably hear rappers talk about this house. They're kind of the jewelry house. Van Cleef & Arpels, Pour Homme. Now, the original did not actually say Pour Homme in there because, well, there was no need to. Back in the day, it was just Van Cleef & Arpels. This is our fragrance for men. Here you go. They then put the Pour Homme in there. If you take a look, you'll see it, Pour Homme. These are both 50 ml bottles. So this one's a little bit newer than this one. And this is the 100 ml. This is the big boy. So, and you can see just the beauty of this bottle. And, you know, as a jewelry house, they needed something that was going to stand out. And again, you see his use of the line, but so classy. The double sort of border, I guess you could call it, like a double border right here. Just absolutely stunning. Van Cleef & Arpels, absolutely stupid fragrance house for discontinuing this and discontinuing Midnight in Paris and discontinuing SAR. I mean, just speaking of SAR, SAR is not listed as a Pierre Dinand creation, but again, it's a very similar thing to what I said about Drakkar Noir. The bottle looks almost identical. You know, they've just painted it green. So is that all they have to do not to pay royalties? Or maybe just Parfumo doesn't have it listed. But obviously this is a Pierre Dinand creation. If this is as well. This came out in the late 80s. This came out in the late 70s. I will get around to reviewing these one of these days. Next on the list is maybe one of the most, I don't want to say obscure, but fragrances that I just don't talk about on the channel enough because I only have this little 30 ml. And God, I would love a 100 ml backup, so I really feel like I could wear this. This is unbelievable. One of my favorite leathery fougères from the 80s. It's called Parfums Ville Kipling. Kipling is the fragrance from 1986. Juniper, lavender, bergamot, artemisia, lemon, carnation, geranium, jasmine, pine, basil, cedarwood, leather, moss, patchouli, and musk. And this obviously doesn't do it justice. It's a small bottle, but you can kind of get little hints of what the big bottle might look like. Yeah, look up Kipling. It's a beautiful bottle with the built-in sprayer on the big boy. So 1986. And now we go to the fragrance that, in my opinion, really set off the green revolution in the 1970s. This is Yves Saint Laurent's Y, YSL's Y, the original Y, not the bullshit Y that they're releasing for men, but the original Y from 1964 for women. And again, look at that bottle. I mean, that is stunning to me. Now, the one thing I hate about this bottle is that this is one of those air pressurized bottles. So the trigger actually is not here. It's in here. So you put your finger in here and spray. And if I just held this down, it would just shoot out perfume. And that got me on the next one I'll show you, unfortunately, because they're like pressurized. And so this is a green floral chypre that set off the green revolution in the 70s. I think if it wasn't for this, there wouldn't be like a Givenchy 3. There wouldn't have been a private collection. There wouldn't have been a number 19. And this is peach, honeysuckle, maybe one of the best honeysuckle fragrances you'll ever smell. Aldehydes, gardenia, plum, hyacinth, jasmine, tuberose, ylang, orris, rose, oak moss, amber, sandalwood, vetiver, benzoin, civet, patchouli, and styrax. Jean Amique, who is an all-star legend. He was the big boss at Yves Saint Laurent for a little bit after this, which makes perfect sense. And so, but YSL is just a titan in the industry, you know, really set off what was to come. That was 1964. 1971, they released YSL Pour Homme, and this is a great example of the logo. This is the original Yves Saint Laurent logo that Pierre Dinand designed That is iconic right there. Yves Saint Laurent. And this was full, okay? But this is one of those pressurized bottles, and you can see the cap's no longer on it. But this was an original fucking bottle of YSL Pour Homme in pristine condition. And whenever I went to go spray, the sprayer like broke. The sprayer broke, and it was just shooting because it was pressurized. It was shooting juice all over this room. I mean, I tried to, what was so crazy is I actually managed to get some into a 10 mil atomizer, but it was like bubbling out almost because it was pressurized. So even though it was in there, it was bubbling out so much that it was like, you know, like champagne. It just popped right out of that decant. Even though I got it in there, it bubbled itself out. I couldn't keep it in. It was the craziest thing ever, and I lost most of it. I still have some, luckily, and I did manage to have a 10 mil decant save, so I probably have 30 mils left of juice, but I had a full 100 mil bottle. But this is the original packaging of YSL Pour Homme. This is what it came to later in life. You know, and that's the Yves Saint Laurent logo written out. That's the logo that I think Pierre Dinand designed. Maybe he designed the writing as well. But yes, it is. This is the proper bottle as far as I'm concerned. This is the remake. Both are good, but of course there's something special about the original. And then they made a Haute Concentré version. There's the Haute Concentré version in 1983, I believe. That's supposed to be more concentrated, of course. So they used more herbs and more aromatic woods and patchouli and stuff like that. But yes, maybe I'll get around to reviewing those one of these days. And then probably the bottle that takes the cake for Pierre Dinand. You can't really argue this one. As much as I love Tetro Alcala, and this might be my vote if I had a vote for anything other than this, but as soon as you see it, you're gonna know. I mean, this one takes the cake for me. This is Opium. YSL's Opium. I mean, how can you do any better? How can you improve on this? This is pure perfection, in my opinion. You know, everything. The bottle, the meaning behind the bottle, the meaning behind the fragrance inside. Fuck me, man. Oh my God, Opium. And this is the Eau de Toilette. I've got some of the Pure Parfum up here. Wow. Thanks to Bexod. My God, man. 1977. This version is discontinued, unfortunately. But I think the Pure Parfums came with like a tassel as well. Just brilliant, brilliant marketing by Yves Saint Laurent, and bottle, of course, by Pierre Dinand. And it later turned into this, which is still beautiful, but you know, this is beautiful, but it's not this, you know. And yeah, Opium is, these two, Opium and Tetro Alcala, maybe two of my all-time favorite feminine targeted scents ever. For me to wear, personally, for me to wear. And then that only leaves us with one more, actually two more, because Eau de Toilette and Eau de Parfum, and that is Opium Pour Homme. It's kind of a little bit of a cheat, but he did create this bottle as well, the masculine version, which this Eau de Parfum version of Opium is far superior than the Eau de Toilette. The Eau de Toilette version is still good. Both are vintages. But this is, I love the thickness of it, you know? The way that the blackcurrant and the Bourbon vanilla and amber play in the Eau de Parfum, it's so much heavier. The Eau de Toilette, I think, can easily be worn in the warmer weather. This is probably more, this could be like summer, and this could be more wintry. So, so that's my video on the great Pierre Dinand. If I missed any, if you know any of Pierre's creations that were not in this list, please leave it in the comments below. If you like the video idea, maybe one day I'll get around to doing a Serge, his name is Serge Mansau. He was really the one I discovered that I think could have competed with Pierre Dinand as far as, you know, just the amount of amazing bottles. You would have no idea that he created. So thank you, Jonathan, for giving me this video idea without even meaning to. Thank you to everyone for watching, commenting. If you haven't had a chance to check out some of my recent live streams, there's some really good stuff on there, especially the interview with Liz Moores of Papillon, and much more to come in the future, I promise. So thank you, everyone. Cheers, guys. Catch you next time. Bye-bye.